And then you want to take advantage of natural light as much as possible. So a lot of your office spaces that you have to occupy, that you need to occupy, you want to other services is like our mechanical and things like that. So we have support service. Now a lot of the support service doesn't need natural light. These are like fitness rooms, locker rooms, conference rooms, training rooms. We don't really need a lot of natural light for that kind of thing. And then we have occupied space. So in this scenario, I'm deviating a little bit from this, just kind of exploring a different option. So let's say we do something like this. So that means I've got all of this space available for other stuff. Now we do our housing pods. Let's change our shape. We say we can do an addition. Can I expand my housing? Yes, I can add 2 more housing pods. So here's one scenario, which means I've still got 60 some odd thousand square feet down here I'm not using. Now the challenge with this is, where's my parking? I've got potentially staff parking I can put up here, but what do I do with public parking? And I got my kitchen, so I have a service courtyard. So in this scenario, I don't know what to do with public parking.
Well, the question regarding public parking, Brett, is considering that the existing site has a ton of existing parking, why would we consider putting new parking someplace else?
Well, if we do future expansion, like new housing pod, then my parking gets a little more challenged. And again, in this scenario, we're grouping everything together. A public entranceway may be here. So
Well, you have it here.
Yeah.
How is this different than
well,
what you're
let
doing?
me show you where I'm going with this. Let's do a co-location or combined real quick. So we say that this potentially could be combined. Now, as Joe mentioned, we have a lot of tall structure there, so we have room for a gymnasium. And again, we're just kind of running through a scenario. Can this make sense in any way, shape, or form? Since we're going to be together, we potentially would reduce our support services. I'm just going to throw these in here, see what happens. Okay, so in that scenario, what you're doing is you're saying, I'm putting juvenile staff parking here, and I'm putting juvenile public parking there.
There's your outside space for juveniles.
We would probably have to
What was the question, Brett?
outside space for juveniles. See, that's a good question. That's one of the downsides. That's one of the disadvantages to this option. There's no outside rec.
Well, one of the concerns, again, I didn't mention it previously, this section of the building This part right here, on this option, as Brett mentioned, we're actually recommended tearing down 33,000 square feet of this building. There's two reasons that we consider doing that. And that's, right now, that's where the kitchen and some of your support spaces are. That part of the building is 33,000 square feet of refrigerated storage. And there's insulation about this thick on all the walls and all the ceilings, and it's a foam insulation. Kind of scares me, creeps me out a little bit going in there. I don't think it's a good environment to renovate and cleaning it up and so forth. So that's one reason why we recommended to tear it down. The other thing that tearing that building down accomplishes is it creates a service yard, which this particular option is short on the service yard, if you're writing down disadvantages right there. The service yard being where the loading dock comes in and how arrestees are brought into the facility and things of that nature. So those are a couple of things that we have to work around on this particular option.
Okay, so this, basically this block you're tearing down?
Yeah.
Okay, well, that solves our parking issues.
Our environmental health person at public health mentioned something about ventilation and the challenge of being so close to the highway that you would have to, I don't know, build equipment up higher. I don't know anything about it.
Or
That's
the
something
air
that
intake
yeah, air
on the
intake.
opposite side
Yeah.
of the building rather than the highway side.
Now, say that again, please, I was,
Has to do with
Playing.
air intake and ventilation being so close to the highway? That's
we
a
can,
consideration?
yeah, we can, certainly have to be considered, but that's something that
You can
manage.
overcome it,
Yeah,
yeah.
you can manage that. Okay, so this is one scenario. Now let's, and you've got some property up there. Disadvantages, challenging to accommodate outdoor recreation space for juvenile.
Would it be possible with this structure to make it look like two separate buildings? Or would it very much be a central
A
structure?
little bit, I don't know about two separate buildings, could be, because, the building's gonna have to, for those of you familiar with the building, it's a big white box.
Right.
So there's a lot of opportunities, like a clean canvas, there's a lot of things you can do with it, but you can certainly, this side of the building, the front side of the building, you have the office space, it does have a different character than most of the building, it's a big white box. So we can treat it differently. It might not be as distinctly differently as two separate buildings like Brett was talking about earlier, but, we could make it somewhat have its own identity.
So less identity separation.
There you go.
Okay, so you outdoor rec, Jim had a great idea. We could make this outdoor rec, push the parking up there. Now, we could probably create two separate yards. We're gonna have some overlap as far as circulation potential. We could keep this circulation separate, we can still keep that secure, but when these folks come out, we may have an overlap with some of that, but we could create two separate yards, we can create one big yard and just not have them used at the same time, it's just a scheduling thing. So, I think that's a great idea, this could be outdoor recreation space.
What about expansion for the transition center?
Well, expansion for the transition center is that you start losing some of that space. So expansion would be housing in here. Now, we still have a little bit of space there. It would give us some internal expansion for either one of them. But the expansion opportunity for the administration intake and component would be in the space remaining, but it does accomplish housing. So disadvantage is we're a little challenged for future expansion on the site.
One of the things about an existing building like this for space that we don't use, this is another reason why we tore down part of the building. Since we're from a building code standpoint, since we're changing the use of the building, we have to bring the entire building up to code, whether we're using all of the building or not. So even like in this particular case, the 60 6,000 square feet of extra space. We'll have to bring it up to energy code, ventilate it, lighting, and things of that nature. I mean, it's not a ton of money, but it is some money that you have to spend on building a section of the building that you're not going to be using for some period of time into the future.
The other thing too, that the seismic codes have changed, and the amount of force that's resistant, lateral force and things like that, a structure has to be able to withstand, is completely different. So anytime we go into an existing structure, we find ourselves reinforcing, adding, creating more lateral distribution of these loads. So the structure in this building was probably not built to comply with current seismic codes and things like that. So as Joe mentioned, we have our whole mechanical system, plus we'll have the building shell and things like that. But this is still potentially a more cost-effective solution than a green site or a brown site where we're building new.
I would say, yeah, also being located so close to US 31 is an advantage for staff and visitors. I mean, it's really convenient.
The location is awesome, actually.
In addition to the northern police agencies, it's going to be closer to get on and off at Lake and still do the roof business that we want as well. So the benefits of all mountains as well.
And a little bit about comparing, these two options as far as, how they compare with each other. That one, Brett's looking for co-located. Well, this would actually be a combined facility as opposed to co-located, it's combined.
Combined, that's right.
Specific.
Now, we'll explore this as if it's just a jail,
Right.
and see if there's anything different than this.
Well,
but
yeah,
we'll do
the
that.
one thing about treatment, I mean, these two options are exactly backwards from each other. I mean, so there's, but this particular, if we consider this one for the jail only, that unfinished space becomes your future expansion for primarily housing. So where we have all these other building blocks, that space over there would be the future housing. It would be dormitory space or something like that, much less expensive construction in the middle.
That alternative
That-
program stuff you talked about.
Right. So that is that, future unknown, could be like the work release or something. I mean, that space already exists. The advantage to that space existing already is that in the future when you come in to do it, it's going to be a lot cheaper than having to go build a brand new addition from scratch right out of the ground. So the approach of these two layouts, even though it's the same building, the two layouts, the two approaches are diametrically opposed from each other. And the other thing the option that Brett's working on there doesn't really take it doesn't take advantage of the natural resources, or the natural advantages of the site. For instance, this option, we're trying to reuse parking. There's a ton of parking there, so we're going to improve the parking and reuse it. Over here, we're largely ignoring it in order to get the separate identities between juvenile and jail. So there's a lot of issues like that that are, like I said, are completely different between the two approaches on these.
Okay, so this is the combination. Okay, so let's look at it differently. Let's look at it
You want
in this
Eric to
term.
take a picture of that first, Brett?
You got it. So let's look at it as far as co-location. Now, we'll kind of configure it based on that plan. Does it make sense to have these things this far apart? Or does it make more
It
sense to
makes
kind
no-
of do this?
Actually, the philosophy between this one is putting all this, the sheriff's office, the staff and everything, number one, using the old office building for office function. And then where staff services is actually part of a taller space. But that's where the parking is. That's the identifiable existing front of the building, and that's where the parking is. And actually, this green space that's indicated here on the plan is actually some of the paving we're taking up to create more green space, because we don't need all of the parking that exists there. So if we needed to, this parking could move down that way and create additional space in the corner here. But I think, to answer the question, Brett, the sheriff's office functions, I think, do work best up there because of the shape of the building, the location of the existing driveways, the logical location for the parking areas makes the most sense.
insulation or not?
Well, only part of it, only that one section is fully insulated. The entire building would have to be brought up to new energy code. It is not up to the current energy code right now, so, you know, as far as putting additional insulation on the roof, the building's gonna need a new roof, so it's not a big deal to put the proper amount of insulation on. It will be energy efficient. I mean, it's, actually, from a configuration standpoint, the fact it's a large rectangular box is pretty efficient as opposed to, you know, sprawling building.
Okay, so this is, what's different is that we have an EMA, EOC now that we didn't have before. And okay, so control, corrections administration, we wanted that by housing, potentially. Or we would probably put that more down here, right, towards the. So, investigation.
Oh, the one thing too about this one section of building here, Brett, it's a multiple story building. So some of these functions will actually stack on top of one another. Yep, the patrol and correction administration and all that kind. This section of the building right here was a 3-story building. Two.
Would you have any more space if you put transition center back in here?
Well,
Since
that's,
you already have the expansion.
yeah,
maybe
that's
it
what,
would be over
that's
here.
what we were gonna explore. It's, so we have public parking here, and then our jail staff parking is here. And let's say this is our Sally Port's over here, which is kind of what they're doing in a service yard. Okay, so then this becomes future housing. So we don't necessarily need to consider housing pods out there, is that what you're thinking?
Right.
It would be nice to have staff parking away from the housing.
Staff parking away from what?
The housing units. It's great that they tell us that our lights are on and stuff, but, and they tell us, oh, you got a new car, that's where you're storing.
Here, let's do this then.
Actually, in this particular building, there aren't windows on that section of the building, so all the natural light on this particular option would probably all be skylights. So you can sneak in the building if you want to.
Okay, now let's explore co-location.
Do you want to do any advantages, disadvantages to just the jail?
And we'll come back to that.
Okay, so let's say, in this scenario, we have street, this is our street frontage, so we've got and we'll just start by building our ideal model and see how it fits. Well, if it fits. Hey, Eric. So this could potentially be shared staff, and then this could be the juvenile public parking. Let's do something. Okay, so this is one scenario of a co-location. We We would do potentially staff parking in this area, public, entrance. We get really close here. Future expansion would be here and here. Future expansion is inherent in there. I've got that whole back area of the site. It gives me opportunity for oh, look at you all twisted up.
Outside space. Where's our outside space?
Here, and then we have to control it here, and fence it in, so we do outdoor space over here. Or potentially you could do it here and here initially, and then that's the future.
The parking, if it's combined staff of the jail center and the transit center, does it have to be enlarged to accommodate greater traffic?
I don't have a good block, but
I think.
kind of like that. So yeah. As Joe mentioned, there's really no windows there with the skylight.
But it needs some public.
Oh, my lobby's good.
Hey, yeah.
I took the low bid in my lobby's good.
So would it be a lot more costly then to expand upward if you needed to someday? You already have that existing space that can be used for expansion for the jail. But then if you really, really needed more, could you just add a floor on somewhere?
On this building?
Yeah, right, and
That-
keep this available for expansion here if needed, or the yards.
Structurally,
thing.
that would be prohibitive, because you couldn't use the existing structural system to go vertical, so you'd have to put in a whole new structural system. But, I mean, and again, advantages and disadvantage. Disadvantage to this is we have limited expansion opportunity for the juvenile center. Advantages,
You can't expand the juvenile and the jail.
well, the jail expands here.
But if you don't expand the jail this way, you could expand the juvenile back.
That's right. So it'd be a trade-off.
What's the stuff on that corner?
Intake and processing over there.
The big gold flag.
Medical, kitchen, corrections administration, and mechanical.
That actually moved over to this side.
That's inside the building right now. So we're trying to maximize what.
Are you still getting rid of that end part of the building though?
Yes.
So couldn't you expand something out that way, since you're getting rid of it, like?
If we needed to, that's correct. That could be an expansion.
You could actually put this right there and those things, you know.
Well, if you look at this block, I still have void there, so there is a potential that,
You would never need this one.
that's right. So
How many
there's potential
beds
there.
can fit in one of these?
What do we have, 240 beds?
So you've got
Or
originally
250 beds, so we have about 500.
500
506
beds to start with,
That's right.
and then that'd make for 750 right there, so that's pretty.
Yeah, and we still have this and this, so, this was just if we had to build something down the road, so that could be, this gives you a lot of opportunity. Now, a question, what if we said, and I don't know what you guys think about this, but what if the juvenile center is here?
I was thinking that.
So let's say we look at that real quick. And we put
You probably need the public parking up that way, wouldn't you, because of invitation?
well, I think public parking's been kind of variable, so it's between 40 and 60 spaces. So I'm just using that as kind of a block
Okay.
to identify it. And we could do, potentially, maybe staff parking's back here on this side. So maybe this is all parking in here. We do outdoor rec here initially, because we wouldn't necessarily have room up there. We've got enough room code-wise, we don't have windows, so we can landscape this, we have skylights. We've created a different identity for the building, so we don't share the same entryway.
What is this? Does anybody know what that is?
It looks like a house.
This whole area here is residential.
We looked a lot into the impact on the community of building a correctional facility, and there really wasn't much impact.
Negative.
Yeah, so
Did you get the
it
whole
doesn't
thing?
do anything to crime, it doesn't really do anything to the economy.
Okay, so the first, I'm sorry.
Sorry, I said it could make someone angry, but still.
But right now, they've got a big
You always have people in my backyard, you'll always have that, no matter where.
But there's
it
no,
is.
there's no research to
I
that.
prefer a decaying building myself.
So the co-location, we had an option A and a B. A is the entrance is off of Preston, and B is it's off New Street. Is there a preference between A and B as far as how it's oriented on the site and the co-location?
Just going like that, that feels better in terms of distinguishing the two entities. You look at two separate addresses, and that is a very clear indicator of separation.
That's true.
Different street addresses.
Yeah, because this would be an address off Preston. That would be off New Street.
And the programming at the transition center is distinctly designed these days to move away from that detention model, and I think that's really, I think for that potential to develop, it's really important that the juvenile transition center not be thought of as a detention space primarily.
So it sounds like out of A and B, B would be a preferred co-location scenario to A.
Can I offer up an option C?
Sure.
Okay. Just to orient you a little bit, across the street from Creston is a city park, ground owned by the city.
It's called Reese Field.
Reese Field. Okay, and to the north of our property,
Can somebody grab that coffee?
it's empty.
Okay.
To the north of our property here is a largely vacant lot that has a communication tower on it. The communication tower is owned by the city of Muskegon. The ground around the tower is owned by the township. So what I'm suggesting,
Not entirely.
Parcel
There's
that
a
tower
certain
sits on.
element. It's not just here, it's a block or 3 blocks or whatever here.
so what I'm suggesting is there's potential location to further relocate the co-located juvenile facility a little farther north. And what would have to be done is the tower would have to be moved to the park. So there's a cost associated with that. But if we could relocate the tower, we could potentially put a freestanding juvenile facility in that corner, increasing the distance between the jail and the juvenile transition center. You want to take a look at this context? That's our Roundy's building. This is the site we're talking about. So we might put it partly on the new and
You guys, Why don't you show these guys? Yeah.